Malaysian or any of the number of languages in the Philippines or Chinese, it has a tendency to make it difficult for English speakers to actually do searches on those. But we can actually look from current, ongoing, hitting the internet daily kind of reports that there's millions of abductions going on globally. These abductions also follow a very specific pattern across cultures. And the same pattern is repeated, even though the language that is used to describe it is also repeated, even if that language has to be transliterated, you find out that the connotations of these things are very similar. And so that the same, a guy being abducted in northern Kashmir will have very much the same kind of similar experience as a guy being abducted in Colorado, okay, from the gray aliens and all of this kind of thing. And these abductions have been going on for a long period of time. And a common thread within these abduction stories is what happens to the abductees while they're under the care of the space aliens. Other common threads include the information you can gather about the space aliens that are messing with them, right? And we now can actually have a taxonomy of information. And I'm actually convinced that the US military, the Russians, the Chinese, are involved in an anti-alien effort that is global. It's being supported by our military industrial complex, which we might think of as the deep state, not the political part of the deep state, but the actual hidden underground technologies and so on. And I'm also quite convinced that some odd things are involved in our war against the aliens. One of these odd things is the 5G network. So 5G is going to roll out all around the planet. It's going to roll out, and there isn't anything any human can do because we need that 5G as a very large, at least in the minds of the military, strategic weapon against the space aliens.
I got to jump in on that because you know how oftentimes you can watch a movie and there will be like underlying themes of reality in it. Now I'm going back to Mars Attacks. The Martians come down, they take over the world like that, but then they start playing some music and then the Martians' brains start exploding. So 5G, I don't know.
Not used that way, okay, but the analogy is very apt. But you notice that where did 5G first appear? Do you know?
I mean, I know that it's for communications. I know.
Okay.
No, I don't.
This is just the latest use of it. Okay, 5G first appeared as an adjunct to genetics examinations. It's a way of examining DNA. They use it in the laboratory. It's sort of like a DNA scanner, if you will. And done appropriately, you can learn a lot about DNA and its active dynamic structure at that time using a 5G microscope, for lack of a better word, okay? And then 5G went to the TSA. All those scanners were 5G, okay? And they gave a lot of people cancer, but it wasn't the 5G radiation per se that gave them the cancer. It was the exposure to the electronics that made the 5G stuff and the fact that it was so intense within that small envelope, that small space. 5G itself is very dangerous waves to be around, but it doesn't penetrate very far. It wouldn't go through your skull. It would just sort of maybe penetrate into the skin. You'd still have problems, okay? There's no question there. But 5G itself is very important because it is so bandwidth expansive. It can carry so much data in a short waveform pattern. So unlike cell towers, which are trying to go for long distances, as long as they can possibly make them, and it's basically radio going between the two towers, and your cell phone connects to in a loose sense, connects to a computer that chops up your conversation and puts it out over the cell tower, right? Where it's on radio waves till it gets to the next cell tower. That cell tower decides where that packet goes and it sends it off on its way. 5G can't work that way because 5G can't sustain a great distance. It really is susceptible to the energy failure on the wavelength and the square of the distance inversion, right? So that you have to pump in vast quantities of energy just to get it to go an extra couple of inches. But 5G is incredibly valuable because you can get so much in the way of bandwidth over it. So we could get 1 million conversations over the same bandwidth if it was on 5G that we, and 1/1 millionth of that over cell tower. So it has this really cool part of it, but it's also very interesting in a couple of ways. 5G allows you to track things in a way that our current cell system does not. Okay, so 5G network, because they have to have many of these devices, like on every corner, every street corner, on the tops of buildings, inside buildings, all over, because you're dealing with distances that are like 2 and 3 and 5 feet sometimes, just down a short hallway before it has to bend, and then you're going to have another repeater. Because of that, they'll be able to track things down to just a percentage of movement that is just incredibly fine. So now you might know a guy with a cell phone went into a building. With 5G, you would know that he's walking into his kitchen and that he's about to go over to the window. You would know that kind of level, right? Now, 5G also has another aspect to it. The 5G handling within TSA brought up some language within the woo-woo world that made me wonder, could that possibly be true? And the 5G within the TSA scanners might, because of this language repeating itself often enough from enough official sources, I have a tendency to say it might have been used not for the purpose that they stated. I mean, that was obvious, okay, that you're never going to find somebody carrying a gun with 5G, right? But they could maybe, because of what it does in terms of DNA and so forth, they could have maybe found hybrids, aliens. And see, that's what's going on at the moment. Getting back to our theme, right? Our theme is that Earth is being invaded right now. Our theme is that our LARP is running here, that we're all living a live action role playing against like a 1960s invaders movie, right? Okay, that series, Roy Thinnis or somebody, right? He was the actor in it. And they had a telltale, they didn't have a little finger and they had to have a prosthetic or something. We don't have that, okay? Unfortunately, we don't have that. These aliens have been, according to the abductees, have been hybridizing abductees for decades now. And it may have been going on for thousands of years. It gives one pause to wonder what happened to Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, Australopithecus, all these other hominids. What happened to them? We should not have displaced Neanderthal. At the time that Neanderthal dominated Europe, humans were hardly a presence. And we could interbreed with them and this kind of thing, but they were an entirely different species than us. And they disappeared as though literally lifted off the planet and taken away. We're only talking populations in the 1 and 2 and 3 and 5 million, that sort of thing, right? So not huge giant populations, but nonetheless very interesting. So 5G could have been used, for instance, to pick up a non-human DNA as they went through those scanners. And it would have allowed the military to track such individuals moving through our populace. Because now in our LARP, bear in mind in our LARP, I think the US military is aware of this space alien invasion. And I think they're putting out all kinds of disinformation anytime it gets close to reality, such that people won't take it seriously. I also think that the space aliens themselves are doing things to try and dampen our natural curiosity into their activities such that it doesn't get overblown and that we don't really tumble to this, and that they're actually doing things within our minds, individually and collectively, to keep us from discussing the subject of abductees, to keep us from taking it seriously. Both sides are attempting to do this because it doesn't bode well for our side, for all of us to really react and run around screaming like the Martians are here, right? Because we don't have that music yet. We don't yet know what it is that's going to make their heads explode. I think I've got a few ideas, and I've been thinking about this for some time now. I've got many sources for this, so let's get into some of that, okay? First off, as I pointed out, we have the evidence of absence. Nobody talks about abductions, yet there's millions going on every year. And these millions always have this consistent pattern. And it doesn't matter who the investigators are. And it doesn't matter what language the investigators operate in. So I've got a book here by David Jacobs, and he wrote a book on the alien plan to control humanity. And I think he's probably fairly accurate about what he's saying, because I find that there's Spanish researchers writing about this in great detail. Very much the same language, very much duplicating what US abductees are saying, or it's being replicated in abductees from Latin America and from Africa. We also see the similar concepts from the abductees that report this in Russia. And in Russia and China, the abductees are talking a little bit more. There's also curious movements going on among the government, okay, governments of the planet. So we could hypothesize, if we were on like a giant game of Risk, you know, the strategy game, that right now there's something going on that seems to suggest the USA government might be captive by the aliens. And the Chinese and the Russians don't like this, because the Chinese, you'll notice the Canadians arrested the Huawei fellow, the 5G woman, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And why was that? Well, there's a lot of talk about trade talks, but what if our guys were under the control of some of these hybrids and the security office of the space aliens, and they don't want 5G to propagate throughout North America, and so they're going to start throwing roadblocks in front of the 5G wave. There's a real problem here. Our problem is twofold. Strategically, the US may be the most infiltrated. Also, we have the largest available infrastructure of coherent electricity for building a 5G network. So China is going to take decades and decades and decades to get a 5G network built because of their topology, because of the problems with the electricity, their social dynamics, etc. Russia is going to take a long time because they're spread out. Although Russia has the advantage, they'll be able to do the cities relatively quickly. And in a 5G network, there's two aspects. Okay, so let's jump way back. The space aliens can control our minds. They can actually control the neural pathways in our brains, and they can do so such that they could eliminate me from your vision. I could be sitting there, I could be coughing and hacking, and they decide what you will hear and see of my presence. And they can do this relatively easily. Okay, so they are able to control our brains through their inbuilt telepathic abilities. They're putting some of these telepathic abilities into the hybrids, and they put some telepathic abilities into the next generation, which we could call the, I guess that would be the haploids. Okay, the hybridized hybrids. They're closer to human. So those ones are the ones they're attempting to inject into our society. Those ones have less telepathic ability than their progenitors, and far less than the actual space aliens. These space aliens control our neuropathy through the what we might think of as the ability to feel electrical fields. Okay, these space aliens are not hominids. Space aliens create hominid-like biological robots, the Greys, reptilians even, to serve their needs. The reptilians, though, are a waning species. It's not like the Project Camelot guys. It's not like any of these whistleblowers that have provided names to them and say they come from Draconis or any of this. All of that is totally bogus. In our LARP, the reptilians were an offshoot that the space aliens did, because the reptilians are extremely easy to control mentally. The reason they're easy to control mentally is because they have a very nascent, very primitive vagus nervous system. It is my conclusion that the more advanced your vagus nervous system, the less ability you have for mind control, as the space aliens are doing it now. And there's many things I could go into as to why I have concluded that, but we can just pass on at the moment and go on to other things. The 5G network, getting back to our subject previously, could be used, in my opinion, to disrupt the ability of the hybrids to control human thought, and also disrupt the ability of the space aliens to control human thought. So it may be that in order to have a free mind in the future, because this is ongoing, they're not going to stop because of the nature of these space aliens. They've never known defeat as we understand it. But we may find that in the future, we have to live in 5G envelopes in order to be relatively free from being screwed with by the space aliens as they proceed with their evil plan to conquer Earth, assuming that that's their goal. The space aliens themselves, I know something about, and they're just a strange crew. And we have to understand that we may be fighting them without really even understanding what their goal is.